So this is a really interesting discovery, and in case you're not aware of it, they've found a burial which dates to between the 2nd and 3rd century AD and involves a Roman soldier. And this Roman soldier seems to have been between 25 and 35 years of age, but he was buried in quite an unusual fashion. So he was buried face down, and it seems that his feet had been removed. So people think there's some indication there of punishment or ritual that's going on. And on his back was found a pugio, which is a Roman sidearm. It's a dagger that we sometimes see with people doing reenactment, or you might see generally. And I want to talk about that specifically because there's actually quite a lot of interesting elements to the pugio, and in particular, its relationship with Spain or Iberia. Oh, before I go further, this is the pugio which they found, and as you can see, it's in relatively good nick. It's got that familiar silhouette, which I suspect many of you have seen. Now, I in fact have a pugio, which is something that I had from my days reenacting, though hopefully I'll get to do some this year, which I'll keep you notified about. Don't worry, you'll see plenty of content if I end up getting around to doing some. And it's also something that I use sometimes when I go to visit schools as part of my Roman day to show the kids, that kind of a thing. Full disclosure, this is not an edged weapon. It doesn't have any edges on it. It doesn't even have a pointy bit that can do any damage. I suppose it's heavy. That's about the only thing that I can say about it. So here it is. Here is the pugio. And I'm only saying that because I don't want this video taken down. People thinking I'm actually brandishing a sort of edged weapon. It's not. You can see there, that's not even, it's a paperweight. And that there really, no, again, it's not really going to do much. But you might recognize this as a sort of familiar silhouette of the pugio. And it does look, just to give you some scale, it does look quite a dangerous thing. And it makes sense because you did need something as a legionary up close where you may not have the space to be able to draw your main gladius. Now, the gladius and the pugio both have links to Iberia or modern day Spain, which is where that soldier was found. When Rome came to use the gladius, it did so because it had been made aware of the gladius and how effective it was through Hannibal. So in the Second Punic War, Hannibal uses lots of Iberian mercenaries because he'd been in Iberia since the age of around 9 or 10. In fact, Iberia, even though we think of him as Carthaginian, Iberia was really where he learned to be such a great commander. And he knew how good the Iberian troops were. He knew how devastating they could be with edged weapons, and he used them. The Romans obviously got the brunt of that. After the Second Punic War, the Romans start adopting the gladius. They take this sword because they realise how effective it is. They change it a lot. There's a lot of debate as to how the original gladius may have been. There may be several different variations of it. It's thought that it would have been quite a bit longer than the ones you may see today. And obviously, the Romans developed it over time, and it even has the name Gladius Hispaniensis, the Spanish sword. So there's your giveaway right there. Now, when it comes to pugio, we have something similar. Now, I should add, there's a very, very good study out there. There's a very good study or book. If you can find it, it's well worth a read. It's called Pugio Gladius Brevis Est, and it's by Marcio Saliola or Fabrizio Casprini. So those two individuals have written this, and it's a very, very good study. It talks about the pugio, and there are a couple takeaways I'd like to share with you. The first is this originated, or seems to have originated again in Iberia, where there was a tradition of fighting with shorter sort of edged weapons, swords, daggers, that kind of a thing. And not only that, they made them very, very well. These high quality pieces of kit. The second thing is where they found them. So often we think of Roman kit, Roman legionaries having standardized kit. That is to say, if you picked up a Roman soldier who was stationed, say, in Syria, you picked up another one who was stationed, say, in Iberia or northern Britain, they would wear exactly the same gear. They'd look exactly the same. And that's not really the case. There may be variations there. We know there are variations, for example, in the wonderful niche world of Roman helmets. There are numbers of different variations from different parts of, say, Gaul or France at different points in time. And this was often to reflect different challenges that the people who were wearing them were coming up against. And that, again, is debated. When it comes to pugio, what's argued, this was a sidearm that was predominantly found on legionaries or issued to legionaries in certain parts of the empire and not others. And that is evidenced through lack of finds, but also tombstone reliefs, where it's shown that they do or do not have this pugio on the reliefs on those tombstones. Again, very good study. I'm giving you a very brief overview. Go and find it if you can. And what it seems to be is that when it came to where the finds were, these were largely in Iberia. So you'd find them in Iberia, which makes sense because that's really initially or traditionally where they're from. But you also found them in certain other areas. So you'd find them on the Danube, on the frontier of the Danube, also on the frontier of the Rhine. And there are actually some references, I think it's Tacitus who talks about how effective they were. In one particular siege, which I won't go into the details of, but he suggests that there was a lack of fighting space and the Romans were able to repel an assault on a fort because they had daggers that could be used in cramped conditions versus their longer short swords, which again, gladius is still quite a long sword. It's it's not a long sword, but it's a short sword, but you still need quite a bit of space to be able to twirl it around and all the fancy stuff. So the pugio was a really, really good effective way of having that short or very, very close quarter combat. And it was obviously issued, or seems to be issued, in particular instances and locations across the empire. And that, of course, then goes back to where it was found in terms of being associated with someone who had been buried in Spain. Now, obviously, there are more details to come about what else they can find about that, which obviously they're working on. And when they come up with anything new, I'll hopefully be able to share it with you on here. But I hope you found the somewhat lengthy video about a short dagger somewhat interesting.